Hello, I'm Samanvitha Rao from Mysore in Karnataka, India. The topic of today's presentation is Glimpse into Rare Birds of India. I'm actually a fairly recent birder. I started doing a lot of birding and bird photography trips after COVID. But during this time, I visited a number of hotspots around the country, and through this presentation, I'm going to share some of those experiences and insights. So, before we talk about the rare birds of India, let's take a look at the bird diversity of India. How many birds are there in the country, and how many of those can we consider to be fairly rare? Before, we used to have mainly books, field guides, which used to have the photo of the bird, some description about the bird, its habitat, its behavior, and a map indicating the range where this bird can be found. Now, this was really helpful for just studying about birds, as well as it helped in identifying birds that you saw in the field. But this did not help in actually planning trips. Like, for example, if I wanted to go to Arunachal Pradesh, it wasn't helpful to figure out where I should go and what birds can I find in which season, etc. So that is where we're really blessed today that we have certain apps that are available to us, Merlin and eBird. So this is basically linked to a global database hosted at Cornell University based on the bird sightings that are happening around the world. So let me give I'm sure a lot of us are already eBirders and familiar with it, but for those who are not, just an introduction. So how this helps is, let's say I'm going to my local lake for a walk. I get there at 5 p.m. and I can start a checklist and I walk for an hour. And during this 1 hour, I might see, say, 30 to 35 birds. So I record this in my checklist, how many birds of what species did I see. And then I upload this checklist. So tomorrow, if somebody plans to go walking at the same place, they can look up this checklist and say, oh, yesterday all these birds were seen at this particular lake. And over time, when this data builds up, from that we can start getting some patterns and insights. So, for example, one might infer that in the month of May at this lake, these are the bird species that are most probable to be sighted. Then, when you take a different month, let's say in January or February, you see that there are a whole lot of other birds that are seen. You can see over time in which months which birds are more prevalent, which birds are less prevalent. From that, we can gain a lot of insight. Now, using this data, it can help me in planning my trips, because let's say I'm going to my neighboring district, Coorg or Kodagu, and I can look up, say in the month of in December, what are the birds that are most likely to be seen over there. So these tools really helped me in planning my trips during these last few years. According to Merlin, we have about 1,215 birds. What this means is, actually, when you download the Merlin app, we download something called as a bird pack. So there is an India bird pack, and this bird pack includes 1,215 birds. Now, eBird shows 1,373 birds that as of the most recent count of the number of birds that have been sighted in India. So why is there this discrepancy? So the number in eBird is that anybody in India might have seen this bird, once, twice, whatever, even if it is a small number. This bird is included in the eBird count. Whereas the Merlin India bird pack includes the birds that are seen in India more regularly. So let's take, the number of birds that can be seen in India is somewhere between 1,200 to 1,373. Now, how many of these birds can we actually consider as rare? Now, of course, there are a number of birders and bird photographers in the country who are not on eBird, but we don't really have that data. So let's go with the data that is available to us, and maybe from that we can infer. So according to eBird, there are about 40,000 plus eBirders in the country, and this means that they may have just created an eBird account at some time, or they may have uploaded a couple of checklists. It doesn't mean that they're very active eBirders. Still, let's take that number. But in this, let's look at the top 100 eBirders. That means the top 100 people who have seen the most number of bird species in this country and uploaded that information to eBird. So I think the 100% has seen something around 900 birds. So if we take 1200 birds to be the number of birds in India, that would mean that almost 1/4 of India's birds are fairly rare. That means 100 or fewer, or even if there are a lot of people who are not eBirders, let's say 200 300 people max may have seen these birds. Now if we consider the eBird data, then almost 1/3 of India's birds are fairly rare. Now let's take a look at why some of these birds are rare. I mean, what are the different reasons why they are seen so infrequently and by so few people? So one of the immediate reasons that pops to head is that these are probably endangered birds or critically endangered birds. What this means is that the population of this bird over the years has decreased significantly. So there are far fewer birds of this species left today than in the past. Another reason is that they are vagrants or unpredictable migrants. What this means is that we don't know when or where this bird might show up in this country, or if it will show up at all. So there is no way for us to pre-plan a trip to a certain location at a certain time in the hopes of seeing this bird. We can only expect to see this bird once it arrives and we come to know about its arrival. The other is that the birds with a limited range. That means these birds are available in a very small area in our country. So you have to travel to this area to be able to see this bird. The next one is birds in hard to get to places. So what this means is that there's a big overlap between these reasons why something is rare. Now something might be endangered and be in a limited range, and that place might be hard to get to. So what I mean by hard to get to places is that there is some reason due to which it is difficult to go to the place where this bird is seen most frequently. It might be due to permissions, it might be due to the weather, it might be due to lack of facilities or roads, any number of reasons, but it is difficult to go to these places. The next is birds in border areas. Now, India shares its borders with many different countries like Pakistan, Nepal, China, Myanmar, Bhutan, Bangladesh, etc. So all of these border areas have certain birds that are only seen over there. So these birds might be more prevalent or more abundant in those neighboring countries, but a few of them are also seen in India in those border areas. But there are certain challenges in getting to these border areas usually because we have border security forces, there is army occupation, there may be permissions and required, things like that. Then there are passage migrants or birds that are in India only for a limited time. Now there are winter migrants which come to India for the winter and spend several months here before returning to their breeding grounds. But these birds are neither breeding in India nor are they wintering in India, but they are just passing through from their breeding grounds to their wintering grounds and back. So you have to go to see these birds not only to specific places but also in a very specific time period. Then there are, of course, another obvious reason why certain birds are rare is their nature. That is, they are very shy birds, they are well camouflaged birds that don't necessarily come out into the open for us to see. Some of these birds are heard more easily than seen, and very, very difficult to photograph especially. And then the last category that I've included are for a few birds which, if you look at this range map that I mentioned in the book, it has a very large range, but the number of sightings within that range is very limited. So it could be that the range is large but the population is very small within this range. Now what we'll do is we'll go through each of these reasons why birds are rare, and look at some examples. So, before we talk about the endangered birds, let's look at the birds that we have already lost. So, the birds that were in India but are no longer seen here. So, one of the examples is the Himalayan quail, which was declared extinct in 1876, a pink headed duck, extinct in 1935. Now, there are a few birds like the Manipur bush quail and the Jordan's courser, which haven't been seen, there are no confirmed sightings for a long time, but there are still claims from people who have heard it or who have seen it, and they just may not have had a camera with them, or a recording device to actually present proof of its existence. So there's still hope that some of these birds still may exist in small pockets of our country, but there are no but it isn't confirmed. Then things like Siberian crane, it was a migratory bird to India. It used to come to Bharatpur, but it was last seen in 2002. Now, this is also an endangered bird. Spoon-billed sandpiper, again a critically endangered bird, but there are some sighting reports in India. But again, the chances of seeing these birds in India are now extremely remote, though they come under the 1373 count in ebird. Now, the reason I said that there is still hope is that we have an example where a bird was declared extinct and has come back from extinction, and that is the forest owlet. It was declared extinct in 1972, about 100 years after it was first discovered, and then it has been rediscovered in 1997, and now there are several locations in the country like Tansa in Maharashtra, Melghat, Dang in Gujarat, etc., where people are able to go and get a sighting of this bird. But it is still critically endangered, and its habitat needs very good protection to make sure that it doesn't slip back into extinction. Now let's take an example of a few critically endangered birds in our country. So one of the most famous examples is of course of the great Indian bustard. So this is, let me show a video of the bird that I captured in Desert National Park. So this is a great Indian bustard male, a large bird, almost 4 feet in height, and you can see a chinkara running there in the background. So this is its typical habitat, grasslands. These are two male great Indian bustards, and it's feeding from the care plant. So it's a beautiful sight, and it's very moving that this bird used to exist all over our country's grasslands, and today it has been reduced to as few as 100 remaining birds, and that too now you can only hope to see it in the Desert National Park in Rajasthan, because there has been some conservation efforts. A large area has been fenced off for its protection, but at the end of the day, this is a bird and it can fly out of the fence, and in fact these two birds, I took this video outside that fenced area. Once it comes out, it faces numerous challenges. Of course, there's a lot of encroachment of grasslands in our country. We consider it as wastelands. There are a lot of industrial estates and power projects, etc., that come up on these grasslands, and especially around the area where the Great Indian Bustard is seen, you can see numerous electricity cables, and this is a heavy bird, so it's a low flying bird, and the chances of it hitting these wires and dying do exist today. And believe it or not, poaching, hunting, these things are still prevalent in our country, so it has numerous pressures that threaten its existence even today, though it is a protected species and it is critically endangered. Now, another example is after the Great Indian Bustard, let's look at the smallest of the bustard family, and this is the Lesser Florican. So, you can't even see right now that the bird exists here, but so this is the male Lesser Florican that is performing its display. So these birds kind of spread out across our country. when it is the non-breeding season, and it is hardly seen. We don't know where all they disperse. In fact, I think recently there was a sighting in Painch on safari. So people have seen it, randomly somewhere, mostly the female. um, but the males usually come back to the same location year after year to perform this breeding display. And one of those sites that they still currently come to is called Shokalia, which is near Ajmer in Rajasthan. And this is where I saw this beautiful display of the male lesser florican. It can jump like this up to 500 times a day. So of course, if you go here today, you can still see these birds. But the last time I went, the person who was there told me that, madam, previous year almost 25 were displaying, and this year we have only seen 5. So the pressures are tremendous on the small bird to survive, come back to the place, and perform. So we don't know for how long we might be able to see this bird. So it is a critically endangered bird. Um, Another example of a critically endangered bird is the white-bellied heron. So presumably, I think less than 50 of these are left today, and the two places where one can hope to see them are Namdapha National Park in Arunachal, as well as Walong in Arunachal. Now, to see it in Namdapha, one has to trek for a few days into the forest, camp over there, and still, I mean, there is no guarantee that you will get a sighting of this bird over there. Now, Walong has an easier access because you can, I think there's a road and you can see the stream from the road. But Walong is right on the China border. It is the extreme northeast of our country. So there is, you may not be able to approach close. You may have to see the bird, look for the bird from very far away. And it's a highly camouflaged bird, even though it's quite a big bird. It's exactly the color of the rock, and it's there between the rocks and the flowing water. So there are plenty of challenges. Many people go looking for this bird, and sightings are very unpredictable. So then let's come to vultures. So vultures, there are several vultures in our country which are critically endangered. It was, I believe, due to the use of diclofenac, a medicine that was used in cattle. And when the cattle died, the vultures would go to feed on them, and that would, that killed a lot of vultures in our country. But I would still not consider them as very rare, because there are a number of places like Kabini near Mysore. When we go, we see red-headed vultures, white-rumped vultures fairly regularly, even in Bandipur, etc. And a few other Indian vulture and all in some of the central Indian tiger reserves, we see it sometimes. And there are places in Rajasthan, Assam, etc. also where these vultures can be seen. So even though their population is significantly less compared to before, they are still not extremely rare. So let's look at the next reason why certain birds are very rare to see. So I've categorized these as vagrants and unpredictable migrants. So what's the difference between them? So the vagrant is something that is not in our India bird pack. So this is not a bird that is considered to be an Indian bird. It is just, randomly somehow shows up in the country. We have no idea why, or how long it will stay, whether it will come back again. We have no idea about these birds. So there is no way really to plan a repeat sighting of this bird. If you say, chalo, next year I'll go try to see this bird, there is zero guarantee that you will be able to see the bird. So one of the examples of the vagrant that I got to see last year is this buff-breasted sandpiper. Now this bird had come to Kannur, Kerala, and it had come, only one single individual had come, and apparently this bird was seen around the same area about 12 years ago. So we have no idea why it came 12 years ago, why it did not come for 12 years in between, and why another individual had come last year. There's actually a term for this kind of birding, that is, you run and try to see a rare bird that has come and a sighting has been reported, and that's called twitching. So, I had not done a lot of twitching. So, anyway, four of us ladies from Mysore, we decided we'll drive down to Kannur and try to see this buff breasted sandpiper. So, we drove over there and we couldn't see the bird. Yeah, and then we stayed back that night and we tried next day morning and we couldn't see the bird. So we thought, okay, maybe the bird is left. We said, okay, this was a unsuccessful twitching attempt, and we came back. Then 2 days later, the bird is seen again. So then we were, after a lot of discussion, we decided, okay, let's go give it another shot. And this time we were able to see this bird. So these the numbers that I have put next to the bird are, the first number is the number of sightings in ebird, and the next number is the number of sightings with photos. So for the buff-breasted sandpiper, a lot of people went, and I think everybody managed to get a shot of it. Few other ones that I ran into last year, one was white-cheeked starling in Maguri Beal, and reed bunting was also in some grasslands off of Maguri Beal. But again, these birds are vagrants, so they are not in the India bird pack. Now spur-winged lapwing is another such example. I think it is the first record for India. This is an African bird that has come to Warangal. So again, a lot of people went there to see this bird. Yellow rumped flycatcher or Korean flycatcher, I think it had come to Coimbatore for some time, and then somebody saw it in Andamans. So and this wing chat and pectoral sandpiper, I think, had come to Goa. So there is no rhyme or reason as to where or why these birds might show up in the country. Now, the unpredictable migrants are actually there in our India bird pack. Only thing is, their behavior is similar to that of vagrants. We cannot really predict when or where they will show up, and our hope is to just go to that location as soon as it is sighted and hope to see it. Now, for example, this blue and white flycatcher, I think last year or the year before last, it had come to Hyderabad and near Hyderabad, and people went and some people got to see it there. One morning there was a sighting report from GKVK in Bangalore, and we went, I think, the same evening and next day morning, and it wasn't sighted. Then it shows up in Matheran in Maharashtra, and then it stayed there for a few weeks, and a lot of people went to see it there. Now again, next year we have no guarantee whether it will come to the same location, if it will come at all, or where it will come. But this is considered an India bird that can be seen in India. There are a number of water birds. Some of them are endangered, like the bear's pochard, Baikal teal, golden-eye, falcated duck, marble teal, scaups, mew, few of the gooses like Tandrabeen goose, lesser white-fronted, greater white-fronted goose. These are all again part of our India bird pack, but we cannot predict where they will show up. These are some of the migratory birds, and we were lucky that last year this lesser white-fronted goose showed up in close to Mysore in Hadinaru Kere. So a number of us went and we were able to see it. These other birds like golden-eye, greater scaups, mew, etc., I was able to see in Gajoldoba. So they may show up randomly either in Gajoldoba in West Bengal, or Maguri Beal in Assam, or Nal Sarovar in Gujarat, in Bigwan, etc. So, but once they show up is when you can actually go and see it. There is no guarantee they will show up at the same place, and they come in very small numbers too. So it's very difficult to plan that you go there and you will be able to see these birds. So it's not like that. So there are again a number of such birds that are unpredictable migrants. So it's better to plan a trip after we have heard of their arrival and after we have heard of their sighting. So let's look at the next reason why birds are rare, and this is birds with a limited range. So one of the famous examples of a bird with a limited range is the Bugun leochikla. Now this is also a critically endangered bird. I think as few as 14 pairs are expected to be alive, and their range is extremely limited. It's close to Lama Camp in Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh. So again, it wasn't seen, we didn't know of its existence until very recently, and 1997 or something was its first sighting, and it was formally described to science and as a new species only in 2006, so not even 20 years ago. And it was named after the Bugun tribe, which is a tribe of that area. Now, uh, this is also still a very shy bird. It isn't. Mostly moves around in the bushes. So even though you might hear its call, you might see it jumping around in the bushes. It's very difficult to actually get a photo, and very difficult to get a good photo. I was lucky that it was feeding on these berries, so I managed to get a shot of it. Also, this area, it can be very foggy and misty, and they are usually seen early in the mornings when, and things like that. And these areas are also, you cannot really access them throughout the year. Monsoon is can be pretty harsh in these areas. So because of all these reasons, it becomes very difficult, because it's a very small area and very small population that exists. Two of the other range restricted birds that I was lucky to see is, one is the Barnasura laughing thrush. Now we have a number of these birds in South India called the sky island birds. So the Barnasura laughing thrush, Ashambu laughing thrush, Nilgiri laughing thrush, etc. They exist in small hills of South India above a certain altitude. Now the Barnasura laughing thrush exists in about, I think, three hills: Barnasura, Valarimalai, and Chembra Peak, above the altitude of 1400 meters. So now, earlier Chembra Peak was open to trekking, and that was an opportunity to go there and probably sight this bird, but that trekking has been closed over there. So I think through a lot of research, some of the pro birders in our country managed to find a place where we can access this altitude on Valarimalai. Now, when I went to go to this place, it's almost it's in Wayanad basically, and it's an 8 kilometer, really rough off-roading up the hill. And once you get there, there's a small homestay, so you can stay there, and from there you have to trek up to this altitude. These are very steep peaks full of mist and fog, and so there is a dry sort of a waterfall path that you can walk up, you can climb up the rocks. So though we went in like a dry season, it's like, because of the mist and fog, it's like very slippery, there are still leeches, and carrying the camera, you have to literally climb up using your hands and feet, and many times I literally if I had lost my balance, it was like going to be like a serious accident. So it was extremely risky as well, now that I think back. Now once we get to this altitude, again it's very steep hillsides all around, so it's not like you can wander around looking for this bird. We were waiting there, and the fog was still so thick and moving in waves. Just when you think, okay, it's going to clear up, another wave comes up and you can't really see anything much. And somehow I heard a small sound behind me, and I turned, and there was a little movement, and it was very dark and I couldn't really see the bird. I just pointed my camera and clicked, and I don't even know if you can see the bird in that photo, but the bird is there. So that was the Barnasura laughing thrush, and after all this effort, I'm really glad that we managed to get at least a record shot of the bird. Now another bird that shares that kind of a habitat sort of is this Mount Victoria babax. It's in a totally different place. It's in Phangphui National Park in Mizoram, which is on the border of Myanmar. Now it takes almost 2 days of travel to get to the base of these hills, which are called the Blue Mountains of Mizoram. Again, bad roads, the usual problems of traveling in these remote places. From there, to get to the top of Blue Mountains, there's a mud track, and if the season is good, a bolero truck can actually take you up. Otherwise, you have to trek up almost 6 hours to get up there. Once you get up there, there's a forest guest house called Far Park, and there is no electricity here. There are a couple of rooms, and you have to take a cook with you, and all the groceries and all the supplies, everything has to be carried up there. Now once you go there, it's not like you can be, this Mount Victoria Babax is like, an easy sighting. It usually is on the cliff side, and you can hear its call. It has a beautiful call and you can hear it. But again, you to kind of, the call is coming over there, you have to run down the peak and try to see it. Otherwise, the call is coming somewhere up, you have to go there. Basically, you have to listen to the call and try to go there and hope to find the bird. So it's a laughing thrush as well. So many of these laughing thrushes are, they don't come out in the open like that. But we got lucky that almost just 2 hours after reaching, going up the Blue Mountains, uh, we were able to see some birds moving lower down on the hillside, and one of them perched in the grass, and we got a shot of it, and it turned out to be the Mount Victoria Babax. And I couldn't believe it, because we had allowed ourselves 3 days at this Fang Fui to be able to search for this bird, and we got it within like a few hours. But anyway, we stayed back, and because it was not a great shot, or it was quite far. And the next morning it was calling again, and we were able to go, and this time it was kind of calling quite close to the path. So in fact, this shot was taken from a very close distance, like maybe 7-8 feet. So it was an incredible experience that the bird is just there and calling, and it's such a rare bird, and we are able to get so much time with this bird. But uh, these are all like birds that are available in small places, and some of these places are not difficult to get are difficult to get to, and the facilities are quite bad. Another bird that we can talk about under this category is the Sclater's monal. Now, the Sclater's monal is in the upper reaches of Arunachal Pradesh. But the problem is, in these areas there aren't that many roads. You cannot just drive around. There are only limited roads. So it's you have to wait for a season when you can be there and the bird might cross your path. And that season for this bird is the month of November at a place called Mayodia Pass, in Mishmi Hills in Arunachal Pradesh. So this is the high altitude pass that that's the highest you can reach in that region via roads. So again, it's you have to get to this place in November. It's very cold, and this bird might be coming up the hillside and might cross the road and climb up in the early morning hours of this November month, when it just starts getting very cold. It's also a very shy bird, so it takes a lot of patience, and you need to just wait for you need to get there like before, in the dark, before it's light, and wait quietly, hoping this bird will not get disturbed, and it will cross in front of you. And we had allowed us again 3 days, 3 mornings to try for this bird. And the first morning there was a much bigger crowd, and you know uh, there was some disturbances, and the bird never showed up. And the next morning, I think uh, maybe a driver or somebody, I think, saw the bird and mentioned, oh, the bird is here, and that much disturbance was enough for it to just never show itself to us, at least. So anyway, the third morning I was really hoping for it and praying for it, and we ultimately did get this sighting. And it's a beautiful bird. I mean, look at the colors and everything, and the way it gracefully climbs up the hillside and comes. It's really, it was a dream sighting, and I'm so grateful that we got it. So these are some of the examples of birds that are in a very small range, and some of them, like I mentioned, they also have a small time period where you can hope to see them, and they are also shy, skittish birds. So again, one has to have extreme luck and patience to be able to see it. Now, when we talk about a limited range, of course, we have our Andaman Islands and the island birds, which are restricted. You have to travel to Andamans to see these birds, and there are a number of birds that you can hope to see only in the Andaman Islands. That is, if you want to see it in India. So there are the Andaman endemic. So there are about 20 odd birds, which are Andaman endemics, so they are can be seen only in the Andaman Islands and nowhere else in the world. Then there are some birds that are residents in the Andamans, but they don't really come to mainland India. And these birds may be much more prevalent in the other Southeast Asian countries. But in India, if you want to see it, you can see them in Andamans. Then there are birds that migrate to the Andamans but may not come all the way to mainland India. So again, this migratory season might differ for different birds. So again, sometimes you may not be able to see all of these in a single month on a single trip to the Andamans. Now, the next reason why certain birds are rare is because they are in hard to get to places. Now, like I mentioned, some of the range restricted birds, those ranges are in places that are hard to get to. But there are other birds, like I mentioned Banasura as an example in a range restricted bird. Now, Ashambu laughing thrush is also a range restricted bird, but the place where it is, which is in southern Kerala, Tamil Nadu border, part of its range is a tiger reserve, and almost all of its range, like Agastya Malai and etc., are highly restricted areas. So it's very difficult to get permissions from the forest department to go to these places to see these birds. Um, Probably the only option is, whenever they do a bird survey, you apply for it and hopefully you get posted in that part of the forest where these birds exist, and that's an opportunity to see it. But again, due to its restricted, it's hard to get to because it is a protected area, and where permissions are difficult. Another such bird is the western trogopan, perhaps one of the most beautiful, strikingly beautiful birds of our country. This exists in the Great Himalayan National Park in Himachal. Now again, the problem with this is it's part of the Himalayan mountains without like road access. So, and you have to go to the Great Himalayan National Park and you have to trek up and until you probably hear the call, and then you have to camp there and try to look for that bird over there. So this kind of becomes an expedition style. That is, you need tents and you need food and you need porters and cooks, and it's a whole, it requires a lot of planning, lot of thinking, lot of budget, etc., to actually plan to go to these places and see this bird. Then Jordan's bush chat, again, it's a swampy grassland bird. So again, it's usually seen in Digboi Saikhowa National Park in Assam. Now again, much of this gets flooded out, during for many months due to the heavy rains in Assam. So it's inaccessible at that time. So during the dry season, again, you need to trek quite a bit through like swampy areas to be able to access its habitat basically. Now the buffy fish owl again is only seen in the Sundarbans in India. So as you know, Sundarbans again is a tiger reserve, so it's not like you can just go there and walk around try to look for an owl. The only option is to go on a safari or on a boat safari in the Sundarbans and hope that the bird shows up. So again, sometimes I've heard of people going 6-7 times and not being lucky to see this bird. So it takes a lot of patience, lot of budget to try for a single bird again and again. So these are definitely birds in hard to get to places. Now there's a whole category of birds called the pelagic birds. Now these birds are only seen in the sea, so they do not come to shore or they do not come inland. So but they are part of our India bird pack. So the only option to see these birds is if you go into the sea in a boat and hope that you are there and the bird chooses to fly past you, or is floating in the water and you are able to see it. So there are many, like shearwaters. Again, there are several types of shearwaters, several types of petrels, skuas, boobies, terns, etc. And there are a number of birds that are pelagic birds. I would say that probably the rarest bird that I have been blessed to see is the sooty shearwater in India, because it was the first record for the country and it's a pelagic bird. So again, the chances of many people getting to see this bird continues to be remote. um, the fun with this pelagic birds is, the boat is moving and the bird is flying and you try to photograph it. So one has to be grateful to modern camera technologies that we are able to track birds in flight even from a moving boat with handheld cameras and get shots that we can later get ID'd from the experts. Because many times when you see these birds, there is no way in the field to identify the bird. So we have to then send these pictures to experts. Sometimes, for an example, like a sooty shearwater has never been seen in the country, so we have to send it to pelagic expert in other countries like Australia, etc., where they run across where they have the opportunity of seeing greater numbers of pelagic birds. But finally it was identified as sooty shearwater. Another very rare pelagic bird that I encountered is the brown booby. So as you can see, there are only 11 sightings in ebird and 6 with photos. So pelagic trips can be surprisingly productive, and sometimes just really hell if the sea is very rough and very hot and there are not many birds showing up. So it's really luck of the day with these trips. Then there are the high altitude birds. Now there are a number of birds that you can only see high up in the Tibetan plateau, for example. There are snow finches, snow partridge, blood pheasant, solitary snipe, grundala. All of these are birds that are seen, above say 12,000 feet in altitude. So the challenges with this now, for example, grundala, right? I mean, the first time I went to North Sikkim to try to see the grundala, I went in March, and March is supposed to be like a good month. It's like the snow should have reduced, etc. But when we went, I mean, it was completely snowed out. The road to Guru Dongmar was closed because of heavy snow, and there was not a single grundala to be seen, because they said it snowed heavily in February, and all the pine berries that they feed on fell off, and there are no grandalas to be seen. So the challenges of high altitude, one of them is of course altitude sickness. You need to allow a few extra days to be able to acclimatize and all that, and the roads tend to be it's challenging. There could be too much snow, or too much rain, landslides. The problems of weather affecting these birding trips tend to be higher. And at the end of the day, weather has the upper hand always. So you might have to, you may miss out on a bunch of species, and you have no option but to go back to these places. Now the Nicobar endemics. Now earlier Nicobar Islands was probably as accessible as going to the Andaman Islands, but now it is not so accessible, and you need special permissions, and it's not easy for somebody like me to just get these permissions to go to the Nicobar Islands. So all these endemics that are from the Nicobar Islands, or the Narcondam hornbill, which is from the Narcondam Island, I mean, it's difficult to get permissions, and due to that it is difficult for us to go here and see these birds. Now let's look at the next reason why it is certain birds are rare, and that is these are the birds of the border areas. Now, like I mentioned, all the border areas have specific birds that are seen only there. Now, for example, if you go to Wallong, which is the China border, there are certain birds that are probably more prevalent on the Chinese side, like the Yunnan nuthatch, and you have the Sichuan leaf warbler, Goldivsky's bunting, etc. That can only be seen, Durban parakeet. These can only be seen in Wallong. Then if you go to Karimganj, which is the border of like Bangladesh, you can see like Kachar bulbul and black-headed bulbul, Van Hassel's sunbird, etc. that are only seen in that region. Kashmir again has specific birds only seen over there. Desert National Park, etc. Hypocoleus if you want to see how to go to the border closer to Pakistan. So there are birds that are in the border areas, but I wouldn't consider them especially rare, because the chances of seeing these birds if you go to these border areas are quite high. But then there are a bunch of birds that have been seen in the border areas that are part of that 1373 birds that are difficult and rare even in the border areas. For example, this pale rose finch, you have to go to the like the line of control, extreme north of Ladakh, to be able to see that. Now, it is not as accessible because of border security forces, tighter security controls, etc. Now, this greater spotted woodpecker is in Manipur and Naga hills along the borders. Now, Manipur again is not so accessible due to the riots. Sindh woodpecker in Rajasthan. Again, very few sightings of these birds in these areas. So it becomes very difficult to actually go and search for these birds in these places. So there are a number of such birds, Mrs. Hume's pheasant, etc., which are in the border areas but are rare even in the border areas. Now, let's look at another reason that certain birds are rare, and those are the passage migrants. Now, like I mentioned, they neither winter in India nor breed in India but pass through India. Now, there are several birds that pass through the Kutch, greater run of Kutch area in Gujarat in the month of September. So, that's usually the passage migration time. But some of them I wouldn't consider very rare. There are about 8-9 birds that are that I've mentioned over here: rufous-tailed scrub robin, red-tailed shrike, red-backed shrike, etc. That are passage migrants but not particularly rare. But again, see, they are passing through India during a certain time only. Now, if there's rain, rain is not really expected in September in that place. But if there is rain, they may leave early, or they may, even in the greater run of Kutch, they may go to only certain parts which are conducive to them. So again, weather can play a role as well in getting a sighting of these birds. Now, at least Gujarat, I mean, we can go, but see, like northern wheatear, pied wheatear, these are all like passage migrants through Kashmir. So again, it's more difficult for us to plan a trip to Kashmir to see these particular birds. And I think one of the greatest examples of passage migrant in India is the Amur falcon. So it's an incredible sighting. Now, this is like literally lakhs, and you can imagine this is only a small part of the sky that I've been able to capture. All around us, can you imagine, like this huge congregation of Amur falcons flying all over, and they kind of settle down onto trees and then they raise up like a wave again, and it's really a mind-boggling experience for any birder, I would say. But again, this congregation happens during their migration from, I think, Mongolia to Africa. So they congregate in some specific places in Nagaland, and it's somewhere, I think, from mid-September to mid-November or so. So it's just again a small period of time when they are there in such great numbers in a small place. And then they kind of, you might see some stray sightings while they are passing through. But again, in winter, it's almost impossible to, or maybe a few stay back in India, but it's usually they are passage migrants. Now, what I mentioned as passage migrants, yes, they are only here in India for a limited time, but many birds also, those that are resident or those that do breed in India, can be seen only during a small time period in India. Now, for example, you have the hooded pitta, which is usually seen in like this May June period, in along the Himalayan foothills, where it, I think, comes for breeding. And many shy skulking birds also, there's a particular season when you can see them, when they are probably, due to breeding, they are calling more, they kind of come out a little bit more in the open because they want to be seen by the probable partner. Then also they're probably moving around a little bit more, collecting nesting materials and for feeding the chicks, etc. So they're a little bit more active, and because of that, the chances of seeing them are a little bit higher. But many times they also breed in a certain season where it's closer to monsoon. So all these places, it's difficult to get to in the monsoons because of the bad roads, landslides, leeches. There are so many challenges that go with getting to these places in times. Now, for example, this vivid niltava, the chances of seeing it in May in Mishmi Hills is much higher, but now we have the cyclone that's come, and uh, weather can play a spoil sport in a lot of these places as well, where the bird is can be seen, greater chances of seeing it in a limited period of time. Then coming to one of the most obvious reasons why certain birds are rare, it's because they are shy birds. They are well camouflaged birds. um, like for all these photos that I've put up, there are birds in this, and this is how they appear to us in the field, right? I mean, it's a small brown bird in a small brown background, staying within the clutter. You can hear them, but so difficult to get even a glimpse of the bird, and like really challenging sometimes to get a picture, and most of the times you end up with just a record shot. And if you do get a really good shot of it, um, you know there are a lot of luck that has played its part, and probably a bit of skill as well. So now, uh, an example in our region here is the Nilgiri thrush. Now, some of these birds are shy skulkers, well camouflaged, but they don't call much. Usually, what happens with these shy skulkers is that they are loud and they call. So at least you come to know that the bird exists over there. The challenge with this mostly is in seeing it and in photographing it. But birds like the Nilgiri thrush, they are not calling. They are just quietly doing their business deep in the forest along some forest stream. So now, as you can see, little bit of disturbance and the bird will fly away. It's full of dry leaves over here. It's very difficult to walk in such places without making any noise. And then usually it is foraging near the stream, where the chances of leeches etc. are a lot more. It will be, though it's well camouflaged, its behavior is that it will be flicking the leaves to look for little insects and things like that, and that should alert us to the fact that it exists over there. So for birds like this, you need to do a lot more research. That is, you need to study about its habitat, its behavior, and try to approach it in a way that you might be able to see it without really disturbing the bird. Then these shy birds need not always be these small brown birds that I talked about, like the wren babblers etc. As you can see, even like big birds like the trogopans and the peacock pheasant etc. are still quite rare to be able to see and photograph it. I think blitz trogopan can be seen in multiple places like Mishmi Hills and Eagle Nest etc. But usually the sighting chances are either it is roosting on a tree in a misty morning and you can sight it, or it crosses the road, or it's feeding somewhere, and you can so basically somehow it doesn't it gives you a glimpse before it gets alerted to your presence. And sometimes what happens is, amongst these shy skulkers, one bold individual emerges, which and a lot of people actually end up seeing this bold individual rather than a vast number of birds of that species. Many people only get that chance because that individual was bold and is giving sightings more regularly to people. We think that ducks are all fairly bold, and they're swimming around in the lakes and it's easy to see, but our white-winged duck, which is the state bird of Assam, is an exception to this. Though it's a big duck, it's extremely shy. It's also endangered. It does not stick to the open waters. It's always deep in the forest, in some forest pool. So Dehingpatka in Assam or Nameri in Assam are the two places where one can hope to see this bird. So the first time we went to Nameri, there was some problem with flooding. We couldn't go to the habitat of this bird. And a couple of times we went and the bird was not there in the Hingpatkai. When I actually was able to get this sighting, we trekked down this path, and down there was this forest pool, and we could see the two ducks that are swimming, and from totally behind the foliage, through those little gaps in the between the leaves, is what the shot was taken. But just like we sense movement due to uh, we can sense movement behind the foliage as well. Even they are extremely sharp. within a few seconds. I don't know how, high up also they were able to see the movement, and they just flew off within a few seconds. So extremely shy, skittish birds, even though they are quite large. Then, of course, we have the endemic skulkers, the wren babblers, the wedge-billed babblers, and like the short wings and the tisias. And we have a number of these small birds in the northeast of the country, cupwings, etc., which you can hear, but it's difficult, especially difficult to get a photograph of these birds. Uh, so so of course there's a large number of birds that belong to this category of skulkers, really. Now, again, one of the things is, see, these endemic skulkers, right? Like, see, Mishmi Hills has its own Mishmi wren babbler, so you have to go to Mishmi Hills, to one part of Mishmi Hills, to be able to see this. Chin Hills, you have to go to Chin Hills in Mizoram to be able to see this. Naga wren babbler, you have to go to Nagaland to see this. So these wren babblers will make you travel to multiple places because they are endemic, again, to small parts, and in that small part they are a small brown bird sticking to the undergrowth and not really giving you an opportunity to get a good glimpse of it. Now, this is the last of my categories for rare birds, and this is what birds with a large range but are rarely seen. So if you can see here, this small, what is this, the what is that, sorry, the yellow-legged button quail and the small button quail. Now the small button quail, look at its range. I mean, it's almost all of India, all of Southeast Asia, but look at the number of sightings of this bird. It's like 200 something. So it shows that, if you just look at the range map and think that a bird is common, it's definitely not the case. It just means that the bird could be seen anywhere in this range, but again, the number of sightings, probably because of its size, of its nature, etc., are very few. Because in ebird, a lot of people, you can also just put records of hearing the bird, but even if you take that, the number of sightings are extremely small. Wood snipe, it shows a large part of South India as its wintering grounds, but there are hardly any sightings in South India. You get a few. I think this time it was sighted near Mayodia Pass in Mishmi Hills for a few weeks or something, but only 17 sightings in ebird. So very, very rare birds, though the range looks fairly large. Now let's take a quick look at what are some of the tools that are available to us as birders, and especially somebody like me who is a fairly new birder, to plan how to see these birds. So like I mentioned, we have this Merlin app and we have the ebird app. Now in Merlin app, there is, you can go and there is something called likely birds. So let's say I'm planning a trip to say Jamnagar in January. I can say, okay, what are the birds that I can see in Jamnagar on a certain day in January, and it will show only the birds that can be seen there, and it will also indicate whether it's going to be common there in that time, or uncommon, or rare. And you can also say hide the birds in my life list, so it will only show you the birds that you haven't seen that you could see in Jamnagar at that time. So that's a great tool, obviously. Then again, in ebird, you can go and say that I want, you can choose again a particular location, and it will show you within the last 30 days which birds were seen, and in that also you can filter as target birds, that is the birds that you haven't seen, if it has been seen there within the last 30 days. Then there are certain alerts that you can subscribe to, like rare bird alerts and needs alert. So this rare bird alert is a bird that is not expected to be seen somewhere at a certain time of the year. If it is seen, you will get an alert. And needs alert is for birds that you haven't seen, if it is being sighted somewhere, you get that alert. Based on that, like I said, it's especially useful, these things, for vagrants and unpredictable migrants, to be able to go and try to see these birds. So now last, it's a 3-minute video that I'm going to play of some of the birds that I've clicked, because the presentation, not too many birds could be shown, but many of these birds are rare, and some of them not so rare, but they're all from certain remote places of our country. So hope you enjoy this. All right, so that's it. So all these photos in this final video were clicked by me, but the ones that I used in the presentation, some of them, some of the birds I have seen, so some of them are my photos, but some of the birds I haven't yet been lucky to see, but they are rare birds, so I wanted to talk about them. So those are, photos just used as a representation of the species. So I'm going to post this video up, and you can probably send me questions if you have any, and you can follow me on Instagram or ebird to see my journey. Like I mentioned, as of now I have seen about 1040 odd birds, and I have uploaded the photos of all of these birds to ebird, but the journey still continues. Thank you.